Hey, all right. Hey, y'all, and welcome back to my channel. On this page, I talk about technology and money. If you are new here, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you found my channel. Welcome to all the new subscribers and people who continue to share the channel and the page with your nursing friends, your non-nursing friends. I talk a lot about just different aspects of the profession of nursing on this page, as well as technology and nursing, because I'm a nurse who works in technology, informatics, STEM, but also money, money for all people, but particularly women. So I'm glad you're here. So I'm here on YouTube Live, but I'm also live on TikTok. So YouTube, if you see me turning my head to the side, it's because I have like multiple screens going on. Yeah, so that's what we're going to be. So today, I forgot to talk about what we're going to be talking about today. So I forgot to do a check-in. So I'm going to do a check-in with YouTube, and then I'm going to do a check-in over here with TikTok. And TikTok, I'm live also on YouTube at the same time. So even if you're only here for a couple of seconds, I do see a couple of folks on. Please do like the video on TikTok. It helps it reach more people. And I'm going to be sharing my screen over on the YouTube Live. So if you want to see what we're going to be talking about and sharing the screen, you'll have to go over to YouTube Live. And it's the same name as it is here on TikTok. So let's do a check-in. How's everybody doing? Did you have a good week? Have you done something nice for yourself today or in the last week? It's been a lot. I've been down bad a little bit the last 2 weeks. That's why I haven't gone live in over 2 weeks. So, but I am feeling better. I hope you are too. Okay, especially for my nursing or people who are in like the service industry where you're caring for people, is always so important to make sure that you're doing nice things and saying nice things to yourself. Okay, so today I'm going to be discussing the American Nurses Association. Just give me one moment. So this week, so it's July 16th, 2022 right now. So just this week, in the past few days, the American Nurses Association released a statement, and also a statement and a letter on their goal to embark on a racial reckoning journey. Okay. And I've seen nurses on social media talking about it, a few, not a lot. I have seen a few talking about it. So I figured we can do a live and just review the statement. If you haven't seen it, talk about a couple of the FAQs that the ANA, and I've talked about what the American Nurses Association, some of the work they have been doing over like the past, I would say 1 to 2 years around racism and dismantling systemic racism within the profession of nursing. Just so you know, folks, here on TikTok, because I see folks coming in and out, and I'm glad you're here. So I'm live here on TikTok, and I'm also live on YouTube. So that's why you see me going back and forth. But I will be sharing my screen for the folks on TikTok. So if you want to see the documents that I have from the American Nurses Association that they shared publicly, you'll have to come over to the YouTube channel. But it's the same page, right? So I've done a few videos in the past on this channel here talking about some of the work that the ANA has been doing around systemic racism and doing surveys. I think I've done like 2 or 3 videos. I did one about 5 months ago on the survey results that the ANA did on racism and nursing. And I think my numbers might be off, but I think they may have surveyed maybe like 6,000 nurses. It may be more, but I'll go into depth on that survey. And then they released the survey, and then about a month ago, the ANA released a full report on racism and systemic racism in nursing. So, but this week was the first time that they talked about embarking on a racial reckoning journey, which I think is a really interesting. The timing is real interesting. So I'm going to share some of my thoughts, and of course, thoughts of my own, right? And I always tell you guys in my videos, whether on TikTok or here on YouTube, don't believe everything I say, right? And that's just with not just me, but with any person who has a platform or who shares their thoughts online, right? Because there can sometimes be misinformation, right? And what you don't want to do, whether it's about technology, money, politics, economics, anything, you don't want to take something someone says and just run with it. Always do your due diligence. Always vet. And if you're a nurse and you're watching this video, whether on TikTok or on YouTube, you trust, but you validate, right? That's just with anything. Okay. So, and then like if you share any comments, or leave a comment on the video on TikTok, just be respectful, right? Because these are conversations I know that sometimes can make people uncomfortable, and I understand that, but it can be respectful, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to look at the news release, right? Because ANA, the American Nurses Association, put out a very short news release. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at some FAQs, which I thought was interesting because I know I've seen a few folks reacting. Of course, I myself was like, okay, why now? why this journey that they're embarking on now? Now, I do believe the ANA, they just elected a new president. So, Dr. Grant, I believe he's coming to the end of his tenure, and there is a new president coming in as well. And they have other work that they're working on. I know folks, especially around staffing, right, and workplace violence, folks are like, okay, well, what about everything that's happening with staffing and nursing and the violence against nurses and things like that? So they cover that in their FAQs, and then we're going to look at the actual full statement from the ANA. And I won't go all the way into detail because it is Saturday. I didn't want to be before you all long, but I just wanted to start a conversation and just share a few thoughts. So if you're here on TikTok, welcome. Whether you're here for a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds, please do like the video because it does help it get out into the algorithm. Okay, so I'm glad you are here, and just remember to be respectful. Okay. All right, so like and share and subscribe to my channel or subscribe to the TikTok. Okay. All right, so now we're going to share the screen here. So for folks who are on TikTok, I'm doing some screen sharing here. So let's see. No, not like that. Okay. All right. So interesting. Okay. So this is the short statement that the ANA shared. So, all right. So the American Nurses Association, ANA, to embark on racial reckoning journey. All right. So this came out earlier this week. So it came from voting representatives of the ANA's membership assembly, and they had a unanimous yes for the ANA to embark on a racial reckoning journey to acknowledge the organization. So the American Nurses Association's past actions that have caused irreparable harm to nurses of color, as well as ethnic minority nursing organizations that persist today, which I found really interesting. The ANA is like other organizations that may have been found in, a different time in this country, businesses, etc., whether public or private. So, there is an assumption there if these organizations were found during those times that, there would have been past actions that cause irreparable harm to people of color and ethnic minorities. And we're not just talking about Black people, brown people. We're talking about any nurses of color as well as ethnic minorities. But what stood out to me was in this release and also in their statement, they're talking about these things still persist today, which took me aback. Okay. And I'm like, okay, so it's 2022 and an organization, nationwide organization, is still perpetuating these things. That was concerning. So the ANA goes on to say they're going to launch a multi-phase journey of accountability, healing, and reconciliation with an official reckoning statement, which they released later the same week or a few days ago, like 1 or 2 days ago, for an overdue journey toward the future. And it says they intend to take full accountability. So That's going to be interesting. So they go on to talk about the National Commission to Address Racism in Nursing. So that commission that's made up of the ANA, as well as some ethnic minority nursing organizations. And I talked about that commission to address racism in nursing in an earlier video. And then once this live is done, whether if you're on TikTok, if you're just joining the live here on TikTok, I'm also live over on YouTube, sharing my screen and talking about the American Nurses Association racial reckoning journey. But I talked a little bit about that commission that the ANA has been working, put together, and in an earlier video. And at the end of this YouTube live, I'll be sure to leave links to those videos, and also a link to the ANA's website, as well as their reckoning statement in the description box. Okay, so they seek to address racism in nursing within the broader profession. Okay, so they have there's been surveys, focused listening sessions, foundational reports, and I covered one of those previous reports, as well as brief lectures and case-based learnings. Okay, so let's pivot now. Let me just do a quick time check because I didn't want to be here before you guys long. Okay, so cool. We're 11 minutes in. Okay. And so these are some of the frequently asked questions. Let me just do a quick TikTok check. Yeah. So if you're here on TikTok live, welcome. Whether you're here for a few minutes or for the duration, please do like the video and share it. It does help get it out into the algorithm. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm also live over on YouTube. So some of the frequently asked questionings about this racial reckoning that the ANA is going on this journey. And they first talk about what's the purpose of it, right? So they said they want to create space to examine their past actions, behaviors, policies, things that they have done to perpetuate racism that then made it systemic within the profession, to acknowledge past harms, apologize, seek forgiveness, and establish accountability for those actions and policies and things to make sure they never happen again. Now, I think this is very bold. I commend the ANA. I am a member of the ANA. I pay my dues. I believe in, these organizations. I know there's power in numbers. But I know this is not going to be an easy thing for them to solve, right? Even with the commission and the survey, they've done a lot of work. But now to go on to this journey of reconciliation, this is a long haul thing. And, for them to make this statement, I'm definitely going to be watching as a member to see what that accountability and what those actions look like, to see if they're really going to be committed to that, right? So, because I knew folks was going to ask, they had a feeling folks was going to ask, because there are other issues within the profession of the nursing profession, such as staffing and workplace violence. So ANA, they're very clear, they addressed that. They said that it's a necessary part of healing, and future actions is asking for forgiveness, which speaks to in the statement on racial reckoning. Now, let me say this, not just racism, but just with anything where you do harm to someone, apologizing is one thing. Saying you're sorry doesn't make things right. Okay. It's the actions after that. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, I commend them for taking this step and sticking with it so far, but it's the actions in that journey that, I will be keeping my eye on. Okay. So going back to their FAQ about other issues within the profession, such as staffing and workplace violence. So the ANA does call out and say that the evidence is quite clear from the literature, surveys, and listening sessions that racism is negatively impacting not only nursing colleagues of color, but also the profession and its ability to safely care for all patients. So let's just pause there and think about that, right? And if you have an organization, because a lot of things, sometimes things really do start at the top and they trickle down. But even beyond that, if you have people who are in a profession or caring for others, whether it's nursing, whether it's any other type of where you are serving someone or taking care of someone, if that person who's performing the act of service, providing the care, have these beliefs and feelings about the patients that they are caring for, it could impact that. And now this is an example that is not nursing based. And I can think about very specifically, I think very specifically about a case that happened in the state of Virginia where with the EMT, not because I know there's a difference between a paramedic and an EMT. Those are two different types. Those are two professionals. This was an EMT who was on a podcast who was talking about as an EMT how when he is caring for patients that are within his care, certain types of patients, if he knows that they were in pain, he would intentionally withhold medication, certain types of medications that would give them relief, or would intentionally do things that, make the patient more uncomfortable and hurt more. And this person bragged about it on a podcast. And I remember the pod. He was doing it under an alias, but I remember that case. This was maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And it got back to the organization that EMT was working for. And then he got called to account for the things that person said on the podcast to the professional board for a professional organization for EMTs within the state. And he said, oh no, that was just a podcast. I was just playing. I really don't do that. But that person ended up losing their job. Okay. So the point is that, thinking about that, and when people have certain biases, implicit or explicit, so intentional or not, and they are caring for a patient, right? And you have these feelings and these thoughts about certain types of, people of color or minorities, that can negatively impact the patient and their ability to heal. And so the ANA does call that out. So, again, I think it's commendable that the ANA is addressing it, but you think about it, there's people right now who have these thoughts and feelings about the patients that they care for, and it could negatively impact the patient's healing. Okay. And so issues such as staffing and workplace violence are directly impacted by racism. It uniquely affects every aspect of the profession. And so addressing racism is foundational to our mission, along with many priority issues confronting ANA and profession. So what they're saying to me, this is how I'm extrapolating this FAQ, that yes, staffing is an issue. Yes, workplace violence is an issue, but so is systemic racism within the profession. And it's something that persists not only within the organization, but out of it as well. And it's impacting patients. Okay. And then they go on to answer why they're considering this racial reckoning now. How does this statement relate to the National Commission to Address Racism in Nursing? What their goal is. So they said they want to recognize the harm that the ANA has caused from past action while seeking forgiveness, striving for a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable professional organization, and acknowledging that those principles are non-negotiable to meet the needs of all nurses and people, because as nurses that, we care for folks. So all right. So then they go on to say, what about the American Nurses Foundation, the American Academy of Nursing, and the American Nurses Credentialing Center, which is really interesting, right? Because these are other organizations. Like, I'm a member of the American Nurses Credentialing Center. I hold a certification, and it's really important to me as a professional to keep that certification. And so they make it very clear. The ANA say, yeah, this is about us. What they got going on over here don't have nothing to do with us. Basically, that's how I'm interpreting it. But it's saying each of the other organizations can engage in their own internal discussion to consider whether a statement is warranted given their past action. So basically the ANA is saying, this is my name is Bennett and I ain't in it, in terms of these other professional organizations. And then why are they saying, why do we use nurses of color? Why does the statement focus on racism and not other types of discrimination? And they go on to address that, why they're saying that. And then some other FAQs, okay? And again, I'll be sure to leave links to all of that here within on YouTube Live. And so for folks who are coming in and out of TikTok, I am also live on YouTube. So I want to go ahead and just briefly look at the statement. Let's do it in PDF because it is a little bit easier to kind of see it in PDF. To me, it's a little bit cleaner. And let me just do a quick time check because it is Saturday. All right, let's do a quick time check. Okay, cool. 20 minutes in. Okay, so this is a statement. It is 9 pages long, and I'm not going to go through all 9 pages. And welcome to everybody who's joining on TikTok. I'm glad you're here. Today, I'm talking about the American Nurses Association racial reckoning statement and journey that they released earlier this week. I'm live also on YouTube, and I'm sharing my screen. So if you want to see what I'm sharing, please do come over to the YouTube. Be glad to have you. Please do like the video and also share it on TikTok because it helps it get it out into the algorithm. Okay. All right. So on June 11th, the ANA Membership Assembly, the governor and official voting body of the ANA, took historic action to begin the journey of a racial reckoning. Okay, so we already talked about that. We already looked at the FAQs, and they said, "Now this is a journey." And I said, "That's what this is going to take." It's going to take a lot of work. Where I wanted to jump to, just in the essence of time, I wanted to talk about real briefly the historical piece, because they called it out. Because as soon as I read that initial statement, I was like, well, what do you mean past actions that the organization purposefully did and are doing today? Now, I didn't see where they talked about it, what they are doing today. Maybe I may have overlooked it, because I'm like, well, what are y'all, like, the ANA, like the ANA has nurse of color as the president, and y'all are still perpetuating these things as an organization, which should not be surprised. Not everyone thinks the same. People think differently. But at any rate, so the ANA says that we acknowledge from 1916 until 1964, ANA purposefully, systemically, and systematically, those is interesting because those words are are they spelled the same? Okay, now I'm being a little bit nitpicky. Yes, but I know those are two different words. So we must acknowledge that from 1916 until 1964, the American Nurses Association purposefully, systematically, and systemically excluded Black nurses. So they're just saying it. So their predecessor organization, their Nurses Associated Alumni of the United States and Canada, was open to alumni association of schools of nursing, including Black hospitals and nurse training schools. So you have to think about it. And I know in the state, in the city that I reside in, even now, and it's also in other cities as well, there were Black hospitals and also Black nursing schools because, nurses back then, they could not, and patients could not go to it was, very much segregated, right? So not only could you not go where people, non-people of color receive care, you also, as a professional, had to go to get your training is segregated as well. So they talk about that. They said the Nurses Associated Alumni became the ANA, and in 1916, the membership rule shifted away from an alumni-based membership to that of a state and district-based membership. This resulted in Black nurses being denied membership in some state organizations. So despite advocacy and pressure from the National Association of Colored Graduate Nurses, this discrimination persisted. And then 1946, they go on to talk about how the ANA House of Delegates voted to adopt a statement that urged the removal as rapidly as possible of barriers to prevent the full employment and professional development of nurses belonging in the minority groups. Now, it's one thing to say something, it's another thing to act on it, right? And then it says it was not until 1964 that a final district in Louisiana dropped its discriminatory rule for membership. Now, in the South, it was some of the worst segregation. It was bad everywhere, but, especially in Louisiana and Mississippi, it was horrid, okay? And we're not going to get into that in this video. So this timeline reflects the failure of ANA leaders to aggressively pursue changes in its discriminatory membership rules and allow for full membership regardless of race. While membership within the ANA was hard fought by this Nurses Associated Alumni of Color, the full inclusion of Black nurses within ANA leadership and decision making remains unrealized and elusive for all nurses of color. And that's interesting. Okay. All right. So they go on to give an example of something that happened in 1939, where a president of a nurse of color organization was invited by the ANA to meet with the ANA's advisory council to discuss the status of Black nurses in the profession. The meeting was at a hotel in New Orleans, where Black guests were required to use the service entrance and the freight elevator coming through the back. That happened all throughout the South and some places in the North. And so the president of that nurses organization of color, she called them, to the ANA and the president back then in 1939, to the carpet. So instead of protesting that discrimination policy of this business, the president offered to walk into the hotel with the other president through the back entrance. So instead of going to that business saying, hey, our organization is giving your business dollars, this person is, they deserve to come in just like through the front way, just like everyone else. But the president of the ANA back then was like, you know what? I know you can't come through the front door. How about we just walk through the back door together? That's basically what happened. Okay. And it looks like that nurse president decided against attending. And then the ANA failed to step into the space of advocacy and support. Okay. And this nurse, President Osborne, was also the first Black nurse to earn a master's degree in the United States and became the first Black nurse elected to the ANA board in 1948. But then after her 4-year term ended, there were no Black nurses elected to the board again until 1970. And that they just go on to talk about the lack of representation on the policy level, that it was brought up again at the American Nurses Association convention in 1972. And they said that it was communicated when it was brought up during the 1972 convention. It was only at the obligation of the ANA from the dissolution of that nurses organization of color, and because they were awarding the Mary Mahoney Award. So Google Mary Mahoney. She's a very significant nurse of color that has made significant contributions to the profession. Then they go on to talk about an instance that happened in 1965, which led to disenfranchisement of institutions and nursing schools that were available to students of color, and how it excluded nurses who graduated from those programs for them participating in the ANA, and how it impacted student nurses of color. And then even in 1970, there were 200 Black nurses came together to talk about the purpose of organizing another Black Nurses Association, which, there is one today. There is a National Black Nurses Association right now today. Okay. And they talked about their concerns back then: tokenism, absence of Black nurses in leadership positions at the ANA, not recognizing Black nurses' contributions to the profession, increases in the number of Black registered nurses, no recognition in the awards, appointments to commissions and committees. And it's interesting that some of these things, maybe not in this same format, continue to happen and persist today. So they gave a couple of more examples, and I want to talk about this comment, this quote, that, because remember I talked about the survey that the ANA released earlier this year, where they surveyed nurses of color and ethnic minorities. And this comment is interesting. Quote, "The power in nursing is primarily held by middle-aged to old-age white women who have just recently begun to consider racism in nursing care. There are racist principles that have been carried down through history and never challenged." So that's a quote, end quote. So that's a direct quote that, in 2021, people still feel that way. There's still things that perpetuated within the profession. It hurts, right? It hurts. Whether you have not perpetuated. You're not a person of color. You're not perpetuated those things against people of color or ethnic minorities. Others may have, and those things hurt. They hurt your earning ability. They do impacts to your self-confidence. Microaggressions, those are things that persist in all professions, right? But also within the nursing profession. Okay. So, and those things over time can erode erode you internally. Okay. Let's do a quick time check. Let's see here. Okay, cool. Ooh, we're 30 minutes in, Lord. Okay. All right. So then the ANA goes on to talk about seeking forgiveness, moving forward, their next steps, and then they do a conclusion. Okay. And again, just in the essence of time, I won't go into it. Now I'm going to pivot into just a little bit of closer and just some final thoughts from me. I'm definitely going to be watching the ANA with this, seeing if they, especially with a new president, if they're actually going to stay on this journey, right? Or if there's going to be shifting priorities within the American Nurses Association and the work that they're doing. Welcome if you're over here on TikTok. I'm also live over on YouTube. Okay. If they're actually going to persist, right, and stick with it. Saying something does not change past hurts. Okay. That's a big organization. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to share a TikTok video because I have seen a few nurses on social media talking about this statement. Okay. And I'm going to share a TikTok video from an advanced practice registered nurse who shared her thoughts. And let me share the video and then I'll share some final thoughts before closing. Okay. So let me start from the beginning. So she's talking about this same statement, just in case you all haven't seen it. Okay. Let me just do a quick time check. Okay. All right. So I know we can be wrapping up here soon. All right. So let me make sure.
What up, Nurse Gang? What up, TikTok? So today on Nurses in the News, headline reads, American Nurses Association apologizes for racism, past and present. Organization extends olive branch to ethnic nurse organizations, minority nurses. Let's take a deeper look into this. On July 12th, the American Nurses Association released a formal apology to nurses of color for the organization's historic systemic racism. We apologize for the named and the unaccounted for harms. Its statement on racial reckoning read, our past actions have caused irreparable physiological, psychological, and socioeconomic harm, not only to nurses of color, but to all patients, families, and communities that depend on the ANA as the national leader of the nursing profession. The statement is the start of what ANA leaders said is an ongoing effort to account for past and persisting racism, to seek forgiveness and to reconcile with ethnic minority nurse associations like the National Black Nurses Association and the National Association of Hispanic Nurses, groups that had formed largely as a reaction to the ANA's historic exclusion. The first step, ANA leadership said, in the organization's work toward a more equitable and inclusive organization is blah, blah, blah. We don't want to hear it. This article really grinds my gears. If you read it, even from the headlines, they're apologizing, but they're saying past and present racism. They're saying past and present attacks on minorities. So that means you're still doing it. On top of all of it, you're useless anyway. You're useless and racist? If anyone has any subscriptions or membership to the ANA, please withdraw your dues. They're not coming out now because they feel bad about being racist. No, your green dollars are affected. People are not dealing with you because you're useless. But now to know that you're racist on top of it, ANA, bye-bye. With platforms like Instagram and TikTok, all the nursing associations count your days. because you're all just getting rich off nurses' backs and not doing shit. Every last one of you. Let's talk about it. What are your thoughts?
Okay. All right. So I apologize for that last word that caught there. I meant to end it before then, but she makes some points. Okay. So she is an advanced practice registered nurse. She is a behavioral health, but she brings out some points. And if you go watch that video, you can see in the comments other folks who say they are nurses responding and sharing their input as well. But you think about what is said, particularly about the organizations, and because I did ask myself about the timing. Why now? Okay. What is it about the timing of this statement and why now, right? Because I know there's a lot happening in this country around, there's some other organizations that have made some racial reckoning journeys, right? But you think about these professional organizations, particularly within nursing, and think about what is happening in the world overall. A lot has changed over the last 2 to 3 years, right? Let's take nursing out of it. Look what's happening in religious organizations, right? So when everything locked down a few years ago, a lot of religious organizations went online. They went virtual, right? And also they went virtual for people who were still attending, okay, where you could still attend, but also membership dropped drastically. Membership dropped, and when membership dropped, that's also money. Right. So I know there are some religious organizations that are now trying to get their footing again, right, and get people back physically into the buildings. And then if you follow Creflo Dollar and his church, how he's been talking about the last week or two about his views on tithing, and now it's like give generously and things like that. So I think this nurse influencer makes some good points, because a lot has changed within the profession of nursing. Now, I am a member of the ANA. I believe in organizations such as this size, because I know there is some influence there that can be done at the political and policy making level, that an organization that has individuals lobbying on the behalf and have some benefit. But there are also, so nursing does not, as a profession, individuals, we also do not at this point in time have to wholly rely on these professional organizations. There are nurse influencers. Let me just say, and then I'm going to wrap up. There are nurse influencers. I know there's one right here in my state who has, a couple of thousand followers, right? A good 20, 30,000 followers, and has a level of influence there. And that's just one. There are plenty other nurse influencers on YouTube, on TikTok. Now, not LinkedIn is so much, because LinkedIn is a professional platform, and folks use it in a little bit different way than say a Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Instagram is pretty much dead at this point. But if I'm a nurse influencer and I have 100,000 followers, not only do I have another form of revenue, or that might be my whole form of revenue, and I may be just working part-time as a profession, just enough to keep my license, right? What would I need a professional organization for when I have influence on my own over people? There's not anything that a professional organization can say to an influencer right now to say, hey, you can't talk about these things within the profession. I'm saying, as long as they're not doing it in a negative way. So if I am a nurse influencer with 100,000 followers, and I have consistent revenue coming in of, say, $10,000 a month, plus maybe a side business as, I don't know, selling waist trainers. I'm just giving an example. What is the value of participating in a professional organization? So you think about how so much has changed. And I even think about what Nurse Blake has been doing over the past 6 to 8 months. And I did a video on that and how he took on the Joint Commission around staffing. Now, I haven't seen anything, the impact of that. Maybe there's some things happening behind the scenes, but the fact that he was able to mobilize that many nurses who go to the Joint Commission's main offices and deliver petitions, and he did it outside of an established organization such as the ANA. It says a lot about the direction of the profession outside of, you know, the work that we actually do day to day. So I think that Nurse Influencer made some points in her video that, you know, as a profession we should consider. Okay. And so, yeah, no, that's it. I just wanted to review the racial reckoning statement and from the American Nurses Association in a respectful manner, right? Comments are always welcome as long as you keep them respectful. Let me just look at my notes here. Just make sure I touched on everything I wanted to touch on, and I did. Okay, if you have any thoughts, please leave a comment below. I appreciate comments as long as they're respectful. If you made it this far in the video, please leave a green heart, like the video, share it, please. Subscribe to my channel. I hope you do something nice for yourself today. It's beautiful outside where I am. And yeah, y'all, let's see what the ANA is going to do around this racial reckoning journey. I definitely will be following along. Okay. So I'll see y'all in the next video.